Hey everyone, my name is Jorge Tepes, and today we are going to talk about Premodern. This has been my favorite format for, I guess, since the beginning of the year. And for me, this is a turn to format. The idea of this video is to share my thoughts with you, and if you are looking to play Premodern or if you are playing Legacy or another format and you want to try this format, I hope this video can help. So, why do we say this is a turn to format? So let's see how Premodern works. As you can see, in all formats that use old cards, you have very powerful turn 1 effects. You have land tax for white, Goblin Lucky for red, Mox Diamond, all your decks that can allow to play enough lands to support it, and of course, Dark Ritual. So you see these, and if you play other formats, you can see some similar cards. So you might be used to lose to one or more than two of these cards. But depending on the format, you have different ways to mitigate the effects of these powerful effects. But the thing with Premodern is that the way of defending about these threats is not that good compared to other formats. So we can also have situations where the game is already decided by turn 1 or turn 2. And speaking of turn 2, for example, these are different threats that you can find in Premodern. These are probably one of the best turn 2 effects that you may have. And here you will see Phyrexian Dreadnought, even though it's a 1 mana cost, but it's usually a 2-card combo, so 2 mana combo. You need 1 mana for your Phyrexian Dreadnought, but you also need 1 additional mana to cast any effect that counters the ability of the Dreadnought when it enters the battlefield. So it's either a Stifle or any other card that can do similar effect. So the thing here is, like, any of these cards can win you a game as soon as they hit the battlefield. Oath of Druids, for example, destroys all the creature strategies in the format. Phyrexian Dreadnought can kill you in just 2 attacks. Even though the game won't be over by turn 2, it probably will be already decided if you can, if your Dreadnought can stick to the battlefield. Winter Orb, same thing. It's not going to kill you on turn 2, but it's probably going to make the game impossible for you to play it. Hermit Druid, on the other side, if you can untap with this little guy without summoning sickness, well, you probably already won the game. So you might see these creatures, you might see these cards, and this is, if, for example, I used to play a lot of Legacy, and I'm used to see these powerful effects that can happen and can enter the battlefield on turn 1, on turn 2. But the main difference is that in Legacy, you have different ways and very efficient answers to all the threats. Of course, you have Force of Will and Chalice of the Void. So Force of Will is basically like the fun police in Legacy, right? Like if your opponent, let's say they start with, I don't know, Dark Ritual, Entomb, look for a Griselbrand and try to Exhume, then you have your Force of Will, and if you counter it, you can say that you either win the game at this point, or you already gain enough time for you to develop your game until the next effect of the Reanimator deck in this example happens. Same thing for Chalice of the Void. If you're on the play and you start Ancient Tomb, Chalice of the Void, go. If your Delver opponent doesn't have, the Force of Will themselves, they are probably out of the game by this point. So these are the tools that you can see in Legacy that helps, that even though you still have very, very, very powerful effects as well, you can counter them, or decks and players need to be more careful when they try to go, try to combo off on turn 1. They usually need to wait for a discard effect or have their own counter or their own Force of Will in order to try to go for it. in old school, for example, like if you play old school, I'm not an old school player myself, but I know that at least you mitigate the power of the effects by giving access to all the decks to the same tools, right? All of the decks can run all the Moxes, the Black Lotus, so you basically are going to be playing the same level, right? You're basically are going to be playing the same turn, no matter what. If your deck is a combo deck or a control deck or an aggro deck, you still have access to the same tools. So these make all decks basically to the same level. Of course, there are going to be strategies that use better the Power Knight than others, but still, during the first turns of the game, we can say that every deck can have access to the same tools. So, now that we understand this, let's get back to Premodern defense. So, as you can see, defensive spells in Premodern are not great compared to Legacy. And then we are also going to see that the mana acceleration is also not as great as old school or vintage or any other format in which you can play the P9. But in Premodern, we still do have some tools. We still have foil, that it's like a weak version of Force of Will, but sometimes you need to counter that Hermit Druid. Sometimes you need to defend your Psychotog, you need to defend your Dreadnought. So it's still a very good card, but it requires you so much of your deck building. You need to play enough islands in order to be able to cast foil and things like that. Daze as well is very good, efficient counter spell as long as you are on the play. If you are on the draw, well, it's not that great, but at least it's something. Duress, same thing. While it's a good card if you are on the play, the problem with Duress is that sometimes you Duress your opponent and then you are facing, I don't know, goblins or elf or any creature deck, so now your Duress is basically useless. You can't do anything to stop your opponent to do anything against you. And we of course have the best removal ever, Swords to Plowshares. With Swords to Plowshares you can take, any pesky creature, you can kill the Dreadnought, you can kill the Goblin Lackey, you can kill Psychotok, you can the Hermit, you can kill all the creatures you need in this format. But the problem and the limitation again is only good against creatures. And as we are going to see, and we already saw in the turn 2 spells, many of the best spells in Premodern are not creatures, or they have a combinations with powerful artifacts and enchantments, and and of course there are good creatures as well. So what can we do now? So in Premodern, you can still play one turn ahead of your opponents by playing Mox Diamond. So, in my opinion, Mox Diamond is the most strong card in the format, and it's actually causing a situation that now that there are more tournaments, we see more decks adopting the Mox Diamond and adapting their strategies in order to add Mox Diamond to their decks. The reason is pretty simple. If we say that turn 1 and turn 2 spells are super powerful, but defense is not great, the best way to attack this format is by playing your turn 2 on your turn 1, no matter what. And on your turn 2, if you have a Mox Diamond, you have 2 lands, you're already playing on turn 3. So you can do basically anything you want. So the tricky thing about Mox Diamond is that it's not good in all decks compared to the Moxes of the Power 9, right? You need to play enough lands in order to Mox Diamond be a great card in your deck. So there are many decks that they can't afford the luxury of playing 4 Mox Diamonds. because that requires some mana restrictions that you need. Your deck can be, for example, like a super aggro deck, because then you either need to put too many lands and the fox and the 4 Mox Diamonds, and that will cause some troubles to your strategy. So there are certain types of decks in Premodern that they get this benefit, and then they are probably the only ones that can have this benefit. But as I said, many of the main decks, of the best decks in the format, are adopting more and more Mox Diamond in order to be more efficient and in order to play the turn 2 even in turn 1. So what can you do if your deck can allow the Mox Diamond? Or, for example, on the other hand, that happens a lot, is that Mox Diamond is a very expensive card. So not everyone has access to 4 copies of this card, right? So there are certain things you can do to mitigate this disadvantage, but don't get me wrong, Mox Diamond decks are definitely the most powerful decks in Premodern right now. But we still have some alternative, right? We can play the Goblin Lucky. That basically, it has the potential that if we connect, we can play a turn 5 or a 5 mana creature like Siege Gang Commander, or we can play Matrion, or we can basically cheat mana and skip turn 2, for example. That is the worst turn in the Goblins deck. You can skip that turn and you play your turn 3, turn 4 threat for free. On the other hand, of course, you have your traditional mana dorks, you have your Janowar Elves, your Birds of Paradise, all of that. For example, the Elf deck is one of the best decks in the format. So you can play turn 1, Janowar Elf, turn 2, you can play Survival of the Fittest and have 1 mana to discard a creature and to look for the squee. And then with the squee, you can, basically demolish your opponent with card advantage and basically drawing 2 cards per turn. But one of those cards is the creature you need in order to keep building your advantage on your opponent. Of course, we can also do the one of the I will say it's a favorite for many people, is your turn 1 swamp, dark ritual, Phyrexian Arena, for example, and then you will start drawing 2 cards per turn. This is a very, very, very powerful play, and you can still do that. You see this in the Dead Guy Ale, and it's one of the I won't say it's a pillar of the format, but it's a very powerful interaction, and it has so many good memories and the nostalgic element from the Magic of old that, when we were in the school playing with our friends, many of us have our black decks, turn 1 that ritual Phyrexian Arena, and then we felt we were like unbeatable. And then of course you have Lotus Petal that can help you to get you the mana when you need it. So for your turn 1, turn 2, and try to combo maybe with a Hermit. There are different things. I even myself have been trying the Lotus Petal in Goblins just to try to skip the turn 2 and try to play the turn 3 on the turn 2. And so far I'm having decent results with it. And Lotus Petal, is a good card, but of course it's weaker than Mox Diamond because you can it only works one time. So you either combo and win, or you get back to square one with a disadvantage in terms of mana. And you also have, 1 card less in your hand. So this is my analysis of Premodern, a turn 2 format. If you like the video and you want to see more content like this, please subscribe and have a good day. See you!